break. So we'll be back with the program where we have 3 speakers and followed by a lot of questions from the audience. And then we would like to again meet you at the question answer session again. So Anupama, to you.
Thank you, Smriti. So I'll be introducing the next speaker for our session today, Miss Chamindry Saparamadu, who has joined us here from Sri Lanka. Would you request you to switch on your video? But a brief introduction to Ms. Saparamadu. She is currently the Director General of the Sustainable Development Council of Sri Lanka, which is the nodal agency for the SDGs in the country. She's worked in various roles related to law and development at organizations including the UNDP, International Center for Ethnic Studies, Center for Poverty Analysis, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation over the past 20 years or so. She founded the Agamya Research and Policy Advisory in June 2019 and was appointed as the Director General of the Sustainable Development Council of Sri Lanka in 2020. She's trained as a development professional, lawyer, as well as an economist with various degrees from the University of Freiburg, Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, the University of Wales, as well as the University of Delhi. Ms. Chamindry, thank you so much for joining us. Please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Anupama. I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon to everyone. It's good to be back again. And so let me first briefly highlight the SDG progress that Sri Lanka is making. In terms of the Global Sustainable Development Report for 2021, Sri Lanka has improved its global rank by 7 positions and is now placed at the 87th place out of 165 countries. And our overall country score also improved slightly to 68.1, which places us above the regional average. And Sri Lanka is making steady progress in particularly 3 areas, that is in SDG 4 on quality education, SDG 13 on climate action, as well as SDG 1 on ending poverty. And if you looking at the national policy framework, that we have set our own national development targets driven by the global level of ambition, but also taking into account the national context, priorities, and circumstances. Our national policy framework, Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, which has been formulated after extensive consultations with a broad group of stakeholders, including the public, very effectively integrates our global SDG commitments and reflects considerable policy alignment. We have also recently updated our NDC contributions, and we have, as a country, committed to achieving carbon neutrality in electricity generation by 2050 and carbon neutrality by 2060. Various initiatives have also been taken to strengthen the institutional coordination mechanism for vertical and horizontal coherence in planning, implementation, and monitoring. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we face as a country is the impact of the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19 and the limited fiscal space for financing for SDGs. In 2020, the United Nations estimated this to be between approximately $2 to $4 billion per annum. And this is likely to be further widened due to the contraction of the economy consequent to the pandemic. And we feel that many of the gains achieved in respect of the SDGs are at risk of being reversed. And so therefore, it is actually one of our priorities as a country is to ensure adequate and sustained financing for development, which is quite a big challenge at the moment. Now, coming to that specific topic that has assigned to me, that is looking at strengthening democratic governance for sustainable development in Sri Lanka, I would first just like to focus on the principles of governance that has been looked at or even considered by the UN Committee of Experts in Public Administration, which has developed 11 principles of effective governance for sustainable development, which was also endorsed in 2018 by the Economic and Social Council. So as you know, that they speak about government effectiveness, accountability, and inclusiveness. And let me just focus on the liberal or democratic component of these the principles, because I think principles have been developed to be applicable, to be able to be generalizable to the different types of political systems that constitute the UN membership. We have different types of political arrangements. But let me focus very briefly on how Sri Lanka is striving to ensure that its governance system conforms to these principles, and then to actually strengthening the governance systems to be able to meet our SDG commitments. Looking at improving government effectiveness, we have, in order to achieve policy coherence, there is a National Steering Committee on SDGs that has been established under the leadership of the Prime Minister, as well as various sector-level task forces for collaboration, coordination, integration, and dialogue across levels of government and functional areas for vertical and horizontal coherence. It yet remains a challenge because, as I mentioned in the previous session, that we have a fairly fragmented institutional structure. But one of the key initiatives to highlight is the establishment of a steering committee specifically focusing on SDG 16 under the leadership of the Minister of Justice in Sri Lanka to accelerate Sri Lanka's progress on SDG 16. The committee is expected to promote integrated planning and monitoring and coordinated delivery of mandates across all agencies responsible for delivery of SDG 16 mandate, be it relating to law enforcement, corruption control, crime control, access to justice, or delivery of core public services. Our national policy framework very specifically says that one of the key targets to achieve is a society that values and promotes peace. And towards this end, rule of ensuring enforcement of law and order, corruption control, ensuring human security constitutes a few of the main pillars of the national policy framework. And in order to actually further strengthen the national planning processes and also to direct planning towards evidence-informed planning, the Sustainable Development Council has taken steps to address the weaknesses in the national data ecosystem and further strengthen the national statistical system by building the capacity of those agencies that are responsible for primary data production within the national systems in Sri Lanka. And the national SDG data portal is also an integrated reporting platform, and it promotes transparency in government data system. It also provides for greater disaggregation capabilities, as well as to ensure effective targeting of the most vulnerable groups in planning processes and also in resource flows to promote inclusivity in governance process. Now, to strengthen accountability in governance, particularly focusing on integrity, government is trying to promote anti-corruption policies and practices across the public sector. Towards this end, a national anti-corruption action plan has been prepared, focusing on prevention, investigation, and prosecution aspects. And it has involved all stakeholders in the formulation process and is currently being operationalized. There was a recent cabinet decision also to introduce legislation on campaign financing through the ongoing electoral reform initiatives in order to address the issues relating to political corruption. And the 2022 national budget also has proposed modernization of the public procurement process, including through the introduction of a decentralized and electronic process for enhanced efficiency and greater transparency. This new process is expected to be benchmarked to those followed by international financial institutions like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. And a client-centric public service has been envisaged through the ongoing digitization plans of the government for the public sector. And an increased budgetary allocation has also been made in the 2022 budget. Now, looking at transparency, one of the key achievements of Sri Lanka is the enactment of the Right to Information Act in 2016 and the establishment of a Right to Information Commission as in operationalizing the Act. The Act provides for mandatory information disclosure by public authorities. The mandatory proactive information disclosure actually operates through three primary measures, that is through biannual and annual reporting reports submitted by public authorities to the Right to Information Commission, disclosure of information relating to initiation of development projects by each ministry, and also a proactive disclosure of information by all public authorities in terms of the regulations that have been issued under the RTI Act. RTI Act provides for disclosure of 16 categories of information. And this actually also promotes freedom of speech and expression as enshrined in the Constitution of the Sri Lanka by Article 14 of the Constitution. Our Right to Information law is ranked at 4th place in the global rankings done for RTI legislation by the Center for Law and Democracy in Canada. Now, in addition to that, the Information and Communication Agency of Sri Lanka also maintains an open government data portal, providing for greater transparency in government functions. The third aspect is independent oversight that is provided, for administrative decisions. And towards this end, there are two parliamentary committees on financial oversight that has been established and functioning fairly well. Those are the parliamentary committees on public accounts and public enterprises. And there is also a considerable amount of judicial reform initiatives that are happening. The digitization of courthouses, introducing video conferencing facilities, particularly between prisoners and the judiciary, has been, and also programs to expand the judicial infrastructure, including judges and staff, to expedite hearing of cases with a view to clearing the backlog of cases. I think the piling up the caseload accumulation is one of the greatest challenges that Sri Lanka face. So several initiatives has been taken to clear these backlog of cases. And also a couple of law reforms, which are not really direct, to look at, just to briefly mention the age of marriage and the minimum age of employment has also been increased, amending the Children's Act. So these are notable legal reforms that would ensure the protection of rights of children. And then looking at some of the participatory processes that have been promoted in the last couple of years, there have been several initiatives to foster multi-stakeholder engagement in various processes, particularly in policy making, planning, and review processes. And there have been increasing shifts towards such multi-stakeholder engagement platforms in planning, monitoring processes. And also, Sri Lanka is currently conducting its second voluntary national review on SDG implementation. And our institution is taking a lead in this. And in the VNR process as well, we have been conducting multi-stakeholder consultations, and there is a broader engagement with the private sector, the non-government entities like the private sector, the civil society, the academia, etc. Now, another key development is how the budget of 2022 was developed. This was developed through a consultative process by including the views of all groups disperse horizontally and vertically in order to obtain their perspective in the budget formulation process. And then there's also plans for community-driven development through what is called the Dialogue with the Village program, where the rural development programs and projects have been identified by community participation through rural committees. And increased budgetary allocations have been made to the lowest tier of government, that is the Gram Heldari divisions that are closest to the people, whereby the people in the villages get the authority to decide on the type of development projects to be implemented in their areas. So these are some of the more progressive reforms towards strengthening democratic governance in Sri Lanka for SDG achievements. Now, having said that, we also just want to highlight a few actually dilemmas that we are confronted with. One is actually, on the one hand, achieving law enforcement and security versus ensuring democratic space. I think there seems to be a bit of a contradiction in those as well. And then also achieving government effectiveness against the consensual participatory process, because government effectiveness is about doing things, in a timely manner, but at the same time, certain participatory processes that involves consensus building, etc., seem to take quite a bit of time. So these are some of the challenges, the trade-offs that have to be made. And then again, the SDGs framework talk a lot about coherence, but at the same time, subnational autonomy. And I see a bit of a contradiction there, because in order to achieve coherence, when the provincial authorities also need to be given their degree of autonomy, also has been challenged. So these are, just wanted to flag out these initiatives that are going on in Sri Lanka and the kind of dilemmas that we are currently facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chamindry. That was very insightful. That is exactly the kind of information that we were looking for with regards to the SDC of Sri Lanka being the nodal agency. And we're personally familiar with what it's like here in India for such a large country. So we're sure it must be quite difficult in Sri Lanka also to coordinate with the different provinces and trying to establish vertical as well as horizontal integration. But it's exciting that that's something that is in the lines for your organization. Thank you so much. And now we'll introduce our sixth speaker for the day. Just a minute. Mr. Purna Prasad from Bhutan. All right, so Mr. Purna Prasad Chapagai has joined us here all the way from Lovesa in Bhutan. He is the lecturer at the College of Natural Resources at the Royal University of Bhutan, and he is the program leader of the BSc program in Sustainable Development at the College of Natural Resources. Our team has been through some of his research, which has so far been related to climate change and agriculture in Bhutan, waste management. And he's also had some work that looks at the social impacts as well as the environmental impacts of new infrastructure projects in Bhutan, which is what he will be talking about with us today. Mr. Purna, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anupam. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to request Anupama to please share the slides.
Yes, yes, I will just do that for a minute. Is this visible now?
Yes, but if you can.
Yeah, I'm just presenting. Yes, is it ready to be presented?
Yes, thank you very much, Anupama, once again.
Yeah.
Yes, as I was asked to present on social benefits and environmental impacts of new infrastructures in Bhutan, probably I will talk a little bit of giving a few examples of these benefits and impacts on social and environment, taking 2 or 3 cases projects in Bhutan. But before that, I would also like to talk a little bit about Bhutan at a glance, and the status of sustainable development in Bhutan. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is the outline. If you could just quickly see. Yeah, Bhutan at a glance. Bhutan is a very small country with just about 38,000 square kilometer. And yeah, so these are some of the demographic information. Probably you can just have a look onto it. It's collected from National Statistical Bureau of Bhutan. Yes, Anupama. So these are also some other statistics of Bhutan. Yes, so this is the status of sustainable development in Bhutan. This is collected from Sustainable Development Report 2021. So as I was telling you in the morning, Bhutan is 75th in the ranking out of 165 countries, with its score as 70. Yeah, exactly 70. And if you look at the progress, what's the status of our different goals in our country? There is one which is decreasing, that is life on land, while others are slowly progressing. Many are slowly progressing, while 3 are doing well, trying to achieve the sustainable development goals. So this is in gist about how the status of sustainable development is in Bhutan right now. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, as I was also talking about gross national happiness this morning, this is how gross national happiness is in a very concise way. Unlike sustainable development having so many, targets and goals and sub-goals, sub-targets, GNH is less complicated. We just have 9 domains and 33 indicators. So, and it is in a way synergistic to sustainable development goal. Yes, please. If I then now go into the topic that I was assigned, I will just quickly mention a few of the infrastructures that are a bit unique in Bhutan, which are not that much popular elsewhere, like hydro projects. There are a lot of hydro projects. One of the main source of income for Bhutan is from hydropower stations. And so that is one of the projects that is very unique to our country, one of the major source of income. Electric vehicles, or, there is a program which tries to make the development more clean using greener energy. So electric vehicle is another project that is coming up. Mud rammed houses, in rural houses especially, do not use concrete. They use all the natural material that are available in the rural setting, mostly mud and all. So these houses have been proven to be more sustainable. These houses have been proven to be resilient to earthquake also, as compared to the concrete houses. So therefore, this is another example of infrastructure that we have in our country that is more sustainable. Ecotourism is another, where we have a policy of having low volume but high value tourists coming in our country. And then also further, we try to promote ecotourism, whereby people go trekking and people maintain waste on their own. They do not litter the surroundings. So we promote that, like cycle trails have been made for the tourists to not to use vehicles or emission making vehicles, rather they go on bicycle, on, or on track, on walking. The next one is a road system, and especially farm roads, and then connectivity is another infrastructure that is coming up very quickly. The next one is organic agriculture or smart agriculture that is taking its pace even faster. Yes. Next slide. Yeah. So talking on hydropower projects in Bhutan, there are many hydropower projects in Bhutan. Most of them are financed or supported or assisted, loaned by Indian government. Indian government being the main development partner in our country, our neighbor. And yeah, so these are some of the pictures from hydro projects in Chukha, in Tala, and in Kurichu. Next slide, please. So background on hydro projects, like Bhutan's economy is being controlled by hydropower stations, hydropower, contributing about 14% of GDP and 26% of annual revenue. That's from Brook Journal. 80% of the surplus power has been exported to India. So, we do not have much big industries in our country. For rural use, we really do not need that much of electricity. So the surplus is all exported to India. And we also have planned to export to Bangladesh also. Bhutan's hydropower potential is estimated to about 30,000 megawatt, of which about 23,000 megawatt is considered to be economically feasible. So we have not reached to this target yet. But we are constructing more of hydropower projects, and then hopefully we will construct as much as hydro projects that can make about 23,000 megawatt of electricity, which would be then the Bhutan would be economically stable with the export of electricity. Yeah. In recent development, there are some projects like Mangdichu hydropower project, Mangdichu plant, which produced 720 megawatts, which has recently been completed in 2019. And it is the most cost-effective power plant in South Asia. So they have also received an award as the most cost-effective power plant being built. In pipeline, we have Purna Changchu Hydropower Project 1 and Purna Changchu Hydropower Project number 2. Similarly, Nikachu and Kholongchu are the altogether four projects that will provide an additional 2,000 megawatt of electricity very soon. Purna Changchu 1 and Purna Changchu 2 have been delayed mostly because of these COVID cases. COVID problem, very recently now also we are in a state of lockdown, and that's because there was an outbreak of people working in the projects being, tested positive very quickly, and therefore everything has been halted. So this is a glitch in our progress. But then the proposed 2,500 megawatt Sunkos project is yet to be started, but we have already received grant money from the partnership with India. It's a partnership between Bhutan and India that has been signed in 2017, and shortly it should be started. In one of the press briefing made by the economic minister, they said, let COVID go down and then they will quickly pick up. That is what we have heard about the Sunkos project. Yes, please. Now, social benefits of hydro projects. I think many of us, we really don't need to look at this slide, but we, hydro project being a green energy source, there would be a lot of social benefits that we would achieve. It would prevent climate change. It would not, we can substitute to cleaner energy. We don't need to use thermal plants, or firewood would be reduced in villages. So the people working in kitchen, they don't need to inhale that smoky soot. So these are social benefits that I did not mention, but particularly a few cases or examples that I have just quickly mentioned here are like one of the projects called Daga Hydro Project, financed electricity to around 9,000 rural households and public facilities on a on-grid or off-grid basis through renewable sources. Like if they could manage with the hydro project connectivity, because Bhutan is a very terrain, mountainous country, it's not always easy to reach this electricity through this high tension wire to different parts of the pockets of the villages. So what they have also done is, as a social, corporate social responsibility, they have installed solar power plants or any other ways to reach electricity to these communities and public facilities. And the next one is international relation. As I told you before, Bhutan has a very good relationship with India, particularly because we sell our surplus energy to India, and therefore this way we have a good relationship, with international community, international bodies. And then public-private partnership. Dagatsu again is an interesting example of public-private partnership project. It has used the private money. So there was a partnership of financing the project, and then this is another social benefit that the project has brought about. Yes, please. Next slide. Environmental impact, of course, it is not to say that hydro projects are very, very, very clean. They do have some environmental impacts. And for example, methane gas production through this dam building is one, or the accumulation of water upstream is one. Similarly, people get displaced from a settlement where the project is going to be built. There is a kind of alteration of length, stretch of river by hydropower facilities, fragmentation of ecosystem in the river, encroachment into protected areas, corridors by the projects. Some of the forest land has to be cut down, or corridors, biological corridors are being disturbed because of the power line being built. So as I told you, dam block the upstream and downstream fish migration. So that way the ecosystem gets distorted. So these are some of the environmental impacts of hydropower projects. Next, please. So this diagram shows you the country map, and the red dots, red points are showing the project area where the corridors, biological corridors are affected by the hydropower projects facilities. Yeah, next slide, please. Sorry, one slide ahead, before. Yeah, so this diagram of our country shows that the affected river system stretches for planned large hydropower projects. So the red rivers are all those rivers that are going to be affected by the project. So you can see it's stretching all over the country. And so almost all the rivers ecosystem would be affected by the hydropower projects. Yeah, next slide, please. Now going to the next infrastructure that we were talking about, transport infrastructure, like electric vehicle. In the diagram, you could see the minister and the UNDP representative launching the electric vehicle program in our country. They would like to substitute all the public transport system from that fuel-based transport system to electric vehicles. And this is the launching ceremony. because it has been funded by UNDP. So that was the funding, launching ceremony. So the program is termed as Bhutan's Sustainable Low Emission Urban Transport System Projects. So the project aims to launch 300 number of electric vehicle, replacing with the internal combustion engine vehicle by next year. They have launched 25 electric vehicle public charging stations in 2021. Around Ngultram is the currency name, which is at par with rupee in India. 69 million has been allocated for building the charging stations. So that's the background of electric vehicle project. Social benefits of electric vehicle in Bhutan are like, we really don't need to talk much, because as I told you before, substituting fuel to a more non-polluting vehicle would be quite beneficial socially. It will make the environment cleaner, but also it will make national security benefits, better air quality, domestic economic development, environmental benefits. By the way, Bhutan has about 75% of land being covered by a forest. Forest conservation is one of the key targets for Bhutan. In our constitution itself, forests need to be conserved, has been mentioned in article number 5, as forest to be maintained. About 60% of the land need to be covered all the time by forest at all times to come, is what has been mentioned in the constitution. Well, the disadvantages of electric vehicle is like very expensive, the upfront cost is very expensive. Uncertain durability of the battery, we never know, because we do not produce our own vehicles, we do not produce our own EVs, we'll have to import, we never know which is the best kind of vehicle, EV, and therefore it is going to be uncertain. And the batteries are usually, they have a lifespan, and they need to be discarded at a certain time, and therefore they would pollute the environment. And then cost and skill required to install those installation infrastructure, charging stations, and all would be quite expensive again. Next slide, please. Environmental benefits due to this electric vehicle. I think we have understood already. Probably we can skip this slide, please.
Yes, Purna, I think, yes, I was just trying to nudge you there, but we will definitely take this conversation also with many of the speakers. We could not do a question answer round, but we look forward to the workshop in March and also in June, the SRI platform, which is being hosted in Africa and also online, which we are one of the organizers. So we will definitely take this forward there, and we plan to have a consultancy workshop and learn the lessons from each of our, initiatives. So with that, I'm glad to also introduce now Sanjeev, who could not be there for a panel discussion. So Sanjeev, we've been having a very intensive talk, insightful talks and knowledge from all the panelists here. And I'll give it to Anupama to introduce Sanjeev to our, yes, welcome Sanjeev. And also thank you, Purna, for your last talk. Yes. Anupama,
thank you so much, Smriti. Welcome, Professor Sanjeev, and thank you, Mr. Purna, for your talk. I will quickly introduce you to our audience, and then we can go on to your talk. Just a second. All right, so Professor Sanjeev, whose answers we had seen during the panel discussion earlier read out. He's currently the Pro-Vice Chancellor and a Professor of Applied Economics and Development Studies at the University of Mauritius, very far away in the Indian Ocean. He was appointed as Pro-Vice Chancellor in 2017. And before this, when he was the Professor of Applied Economics and Development Studies, which he continues to be, he served as the Dean of Faculty of Social Studies and Humanities from 2008 to 2011. His research areas include, amongst many other things, theoretical and applied economics, development issues, and macroeconomics of the environment. Additionally, he has consulted on quite a few different projects for various international institutions, namely the World Bank, the UNDP, UNEP, FAO, the International Organization for Migration, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, as well as the Southern African Development Community. So many things in common there between our multiple speakers. Thank you so much, Professor Sanjeev, for taking the time out and joining us today. Please, I hand over the floor to you.
Thanks a lot, Anupama and Simriti, and all members of the panel and the audience. I apologize for not having been with you during the panel discussion. In fact, we had lots of interviews today and I had to skip the last one and to join you. But it's a pleasure. And I would be very glad to talk about the SDGs and in particular about the role of institutions in championing, the development of Mauritius and the sustainable development in particular. Unfortunately, I haven't prepared slides for you, but I will just go over and give you facts as and when I progress in the discussion. Well, before I move to the crux of the matter, that is of the role of institutions, I'm inspired when I've seen the previous discussant about Bhutan was talking about the economy. So just to give you a bit of background of what comprises the Mauritian economy. Mauritius got its independence in 1968. It was a very low developing country with a per capita income at that time of 200 USD, and which was an agro-based economy, sugar dominated, and today it has graduated to a high income economy with a per capita income of 13,000 USD. But slightly, because of COVID, things have not been very good and rosy for Mauritius, in particular the tourism sector. So the per capita income has dropped, and we hope that things will be better in a few years to come. And we have shifted from a traditional agro-based, sugar-dominated economy into what we call a services-based economy, and with strong emphasis on the financial sector, on the tourism sector, and administration. So for us, as a small island developing economy, Mauritius, in fact, has at heart the 17 SDG goals. So, and in particular, of course, when I said 17, we have to prioritize, because it's not something that we can realize even if we have specific targets, until and unless we say what is our priorities. Just to remind you also, the Mauritian population is around 1.3 million, and we normally have 1 million tourists. So during a year, you have 2.3 million roughly people who depend on our environment, who depend on consumption, and they have to be provided with goods and services. Right, so when it comes to adherence to the Sustainable Development Goals, we can start with the role of institutions from various perspectives. It could be from academia, where I have myself been involved as a researcher, as an economist. I've been writing reports with respect to the quality of institutions in the region, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa. When we have got very good indicators now, I refer to World Bank website, where we've got work which has been done by Kaufman. We have quality, institutional quality data on rule of law, on ethno-fractionalization, voice and accountability, corruption. We've got lots of the statistics that we use whenever, as an economist, sometimes we need to find the correlation between progress in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals and the quality of institutions, because in many countries we've seen that there is an adverse relationship, right? Adverse, when I say it's that when the quality of institutions is poor or very low, then achievement of the sustainable development goals is at stake. It's very difficult to sustain an economy when you have a very poor institutional quality. So it's always good, therefore, to maintain our institutions on the right track. And obviously, it's not something which is done overnight, or it might take years for us to improve our statistics, because in some countries, the statistics on let's say, on the role of institutions, they are negative. Normally, you have a range from minus 2.5 to 2.5. There is a range for this. So when you're in the negative range, it means that the institutions are suffering. There is very poor quality of institutions. If you take the negative to 0, and when it is positive and you approaches a positive figure of 2.5, which means that you have moved into the positive range, quality of institutions is getting better. So that's one general aspect we do look at as economists or social scientists, but how does a country fare in terms of its institutional quality? Now, when you look at the structure of institutions, here when I'm saying institutions, is generally you talk about the governmental organizations, consolidated government, which covers local, central, and district council, municipal councils. So all these are taken into account when we are doing this kind of assessment. Now, when I look at the structure, in the case of Mauritius, fortunately, the quality of institutions is on the positive side as compared to some other sub-Saharan African or Latin American countries. So, but of course that we need to keep track. It might drop, it might change. It's not that we are perfect as the Norwegian countries, Sweden, Finland, Norway. These are the best countries in terms of quality of institutions, but we are striving hard to improve. So in the context of Mauritius, we are highly vulnerable as a small island developing economy. Since I've seen the talk sometimes rotating around climate change is one of the several challenges that we face in Mauritius. And I would say why, because we have cyclones as an island economy, island state. We are exposed to extreme weather events. We, according to the World Disaster Report, World Disaster Report, Natural Disaster Report, Mauritius is one of the most vulnerable countries that you would see. And we tend to try to mitigate, try to adapt ourselves to climate change. It's over years, obviously, it's not now. We've been facing cyclones, extreme weather, since decades, since centuries, but we are trying to become more resilient. But in order to become resilient to these, in order to be able to achieve the sustainable development goals, we have to get our institutions right. So when I say institutions, I will talk about what can be done at the level of a country in order to improve on sustainability. Now, when you look at the 17 SDGs, it's quite scattered, right? But United Nations has further refined in terms of fewer, clubbing them into different, let's say, clusters, so that there is more follow-up in terms of accountability, in terms of the response and tracking of progress. But as it is, if you rely on the 17 goals, we need to have the indicators. It's based on the indicators that actually one will be able to really track the progress. Now, when I talk about the role of institutions, we have the government. The government itself has different layers. You can have the state government, we can have the local government, we can have, provincial government. So all these are layers that we need to study, and we don't want also, a bureaucratic approach to SDGs. Why bureaucratic? Because the bureaucracy sometimes may kill the enthusiasm, may kill the whole spirit or defeat the purpose of achieving a particular goal when it comes to mobilizing resources, follow up on policies, and the implementation process. Well, sorry, just hold on 1 minute. I just answered some. Sorry for this, I just got a phone call from somewhere. So what I was saying is that the kind of layers sometimes we have at the governmental level, it's like these might constitute hurdles to our progress. So these are things that we have to be very careful, because there are laws to be enacted, laws to be reviewed, in order to ensure that we achieve certain targets as prioritized under the different SDG goals. Now, government layers is one aspect, but then at the same time, we need to find how does the central government objective, or even the local government objectives, they are coherent with the international norms, coherent with achieving the SDG goals, because sometimes we might be having our own domestic priorities, because local government, when we talk about fiscal decentralization, they have their own peculiarities, their own problems to address, and it might not be very easy to just link up whatever we have at the local level with what the central government wants to achieve, or what maybe the United Nations want to achieve. So that is something which we have to look at. And obviously the limited resources, it could be physical, it could be financial, it could be human. Achieving the SDGs actually requires a lot of resources to be mobilized. So do we need the international community to assist us? All these requires proper planning. And that's what I said is like, it has to be at the apex itself, at the central government, spearheading not all the goals, but particular goals, because some of them do overlap. So what constitute the priorities of the central and the local government in order to make an alignment and to achieve the goals in a reasonable time frame? Now that's one, government is one. Secondly is about the private sector. When we talk about the private sector, in particular, I'm talking about the business community. So how do we get their buy-in? Because the private sector might have its own objectives, market share, profitability, so might not be concerned. But we know that private sector is indirectly concerned in terms of the negative externality effects that they normally, impose or confront the society. So we have one way of getting them. There are tax policies, there are government policies, subsidies, etc., that have to be obviously realigned in order to get their buying, to get them committed, and to get their help in achieving the SDGs. So government alone, it might not be something which is very feasible. So that's an aspect which we have to also take on board. And thirdly, it's about the community engagement. If we want to have the trickle-down effect, whatever policies are being adopted, how do these transcend, how do these move to the community? We need to have the NGOs. So then the non-governmental organization, the civil society is an important stakeholder that must also be on board. So I would say that it requires, therefore, lots of efforts to be done by the central government to ensure that proper trickling down to the state level governments and to communicate at the grassroots level with the business community and with also the civil society or people at large. So that's something which is in Mauritius. How do? We get these people involved. We have the NGOs, we have lots of NGOs. Obviously, for a small country, when I say lots proportionality, we will not be able to defeat India, very large federation. But at the same time, we do have a lot of them. They do receive grants from the government, but most of them, they have their own resources from the international community, from people contributing, donors. So from there, they are moving into the different aspects. So one way of coaching them is to allow them to help the government by moving into the SDG targets. They have to help out. They can't just, the scheme is that when you look at SDGs sometimes, when you look at the civil society, sometimes or NGOs, they might be having their own objectives, but now this has been rationalized. So we have got the Ministry of Social Integration and Empowerment that do liaise with them in order to make them more focused, the NGOs, and in combating, in struggling against poverty, against all those, what we call loopholes in the society, problems that are cropping up in the family, gender issues, poverty, child welfare. So all these are the role of NGOs are very important in that aspect. So the government alone may not be able to do so. Sometimes you have the business community. So how do we get the business community on board? They do pay what we call these through the corporate social responsibility. In fact, it used to be a tax of 2%, 2 to 5%. So that's like a compulsory contribution to a corporate social responsibility fund, which is managed by the government, and that is basically used in order to fight certain causes linked to the SDGs at the same time. So that's something which is again through an institutional setup, well monitored with a Ministry of Social Integration, which looks after this. We also have at the level of the Ministry of Environment, when we talk, why I'm citing this, because of the aspect, the climate change aspect, where we have the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Committee, which gets activated whenever you have extreme weather lurking around. It could be a storm surge, cyclone, floods. So they are also an active part of organ of the government, constituting, which is made of different ministries and people who have experience from the Met Office, the Defense Unit. It could be also from the health center. So all these are organs of the government which try to address extreme weather events, which is part, obviously, not all the SDGs, but one aspect which is looked at. Now, one thing that I want also to share with you is about the role of the academic community, where I'm directly concerned, probably most of you also related and research institutions. At the University of Mauritius, what we have done is we are spearheading the SDGs by having clusters. We have got different research groups which have come up. So they address the SDGs through research. With whatever research fund that we used to have, we are saying now, no, you can't just get the fund, you have to bid for it. And the bidding exercise is based on whatever SDG project they have. And we normally allocate in terms of those projects that will address the highest number of SDG overlapping, because some of the SDG targets the overlap in between. So based on this, we allocate the funds and we encourage researchers at the university to be engaged in the activities. They produce books, publications, reports, which we share with the government and feed in terms of the policy recommendations whenever the budgets are being presented or at the international community level. So the university also has got modules, courses, or programs of study which address SDGs specifically. Different faculties, we've got 7 faculties on campus. You might visit our website, you will see all of them. So they have that mandate to contribute towards the SDGs at the same time. And the Department of Economics also is working on the role of institutions. So that's where I've been involved. And we write reports for International Institute of Migration. Recently, I just want to share with you one aspect about institutional framework, which has to be revisited, is in the region of Africa, for instance, how do you address climate change? It's through migration. Now, migration is sometimes there are some countries like Maldives, the Tonga, not necessarily Mauritius, which may disappear in the next 50 years. So what do you do with the inhabitants? Where do you send them? So we have to have a migration plan. It could be within the country, like in Mauritius, we have the coastal region. There are many people who are exposed coastally because when they are exposed to climate extreme, let's say cyclones, soil erosion, beach erosion. So what do we do with them? We need to have a migration plan from coastal to inland, because we are a small country too, 720 square miles. So that's very small, a very tiny dot in the Indian Ocean. So similarly, our countries, so we have to find a plan with the SADC region, Southern African Development Community, how to encourage mobility of people, Mauritians moving there, and they can also come, so that whenever there is disaster mitigation aspects through migration, which is an important element which we need to address, which is however not looked at because there are many laws to be amended. Some governments do not necessarily like to have refugees, climate refugees, for instance. So these are important aspects. I don't know whether my time is off or I can stop here. I don't have any problem.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Sanjeev. That was very insightful, and thank you so much, yes, for sharing all these details about Mauritius. In fact, it's been a little difficult for us to get in touch, as I mentioned to you earlier, with officials and representatives from Mauritius because of the logistical and the gap in distance between in our region and yours. But we are very excited to work with our Mauritian stakeholders going forward, and we're very excited to engage with you further in our work as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We know that you were pressed for time for today. We are also running late by a few minutes, so we're going to have to skip some of the questions for the session. But whatever questions will be coming in will be made note of in the report that we'll be preparing for the webinar, and we will be sharing that with the speakers, as well as, it'll be up on our website, so you can have a look at it there. The recordings for this entire session will also be up on the Derecha Center website, the Future Earth South Asia website, as well as the Derecha Center YouTube page. And I will hand over to Smriti.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sanjeev, for your talk, and also Anupama for moderating this whole session. So we do have a set of rapporteurs with us, and they've done a beautiful job of summarizing what many of you missed during these are all our rapporteurs here. So they will be summing up what was missed in the panel discussion as well. So I invite Maitri, who is our science officer working on the Sustainable Communities program, to give a summary of the whole event.
Good afternoon, everybody. The summary will be in 2 parts. I'll first talk about the panel discussion summary, and then I'll just go over a couple of points that all our speakers Right? So the panel discussion, this is the basic summary that was presented to us. We have seen that the SDGs have global, regional, and local relevance, and SDGs are the solution to the development disaster that our planet is facing right now, which is currently COVID and climate change. Post-COVID era, risk management and resilience will be our main focus areas. And the panelists also discussed that there is a need for data collection, procurement of resources, innovative financing solutions for all the SDGs, and the urge to set up a proper action plan to track the evolution of the SDG goals concerning each country. The other topics that were discussed in the panel were the significance of applying systems in development planning, country-specific relevance of the SDGs, and the importance of bringing in academia and research institutions, and also private sector community involvement in the cross-sectoral collaboration. And another important point that was raised was the trade-off between economic progress and environmental resources. Also, how community engagement is very important for the implementation of the SDGs, and the various challenges for achieving these sustainable development goals were also mentioned by all the speakers. This is a little summary of the panel discussion. Now I'll move on to the talks by each of our speakers. So the status of the SDGs in the various South Asian countries were discussed and explained by our respective speakers. I will start from the first. Ms. Famida Khatun explained how the pandemic has challenged the sustainable development goals achieved by the South Asian countries during the past several decades. She explained the challenges and objectives of the implementation of the macroeconomic policy. Mr. Khurshid Alam explained how a single country cannot defeat climate change. He emphasized the need for collaboration between various countries, and that is the key to defeating climate change. He also spoke of the three major challenges faced by the region, which was extreme weather conditions, water sharing systems, and the food system. Mr. Sundar Narayan Mishra highlighted how the importance of community engagement and participation as SDGs are implemented for these communities. He also spoke about in various ways in which community engagement can take place, like sensitization and awareness development, how you contextualize the work, you revisit your exclusion risks, to mention a few, and the various challenges faced in a style of work, like not inclusiveness of all parts and communities in India, and how it can be implemented at various levels, and how those are the challenges that are faced. Mr. Pranjal Pradhan mentioned that the COVID pandemic also provides various activities for various opportunities for reflecting on past and for future sustainable transformation. He also mentioned that there is a requirement for more research, evidence, and evidence-based policy making for sustainable transformation. He also discussed this SDG interaction and explained that positive and negative interactions also exist. When we talk about Sri Lanka, Ms. Chamindry, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing any of your names wrong. She mentioned that Sri Lanka's efforts towards building statistical and data abilities was to straighten national planning processes, evidence-based policy, weakness in the national data system, and how there have been some SDG data portal to promote transparency in the government data system. We move on to Mr. Purna Prasad Chapagai. He discussed some of the unique infrastructure projects that are coming up in Bhutan, the positive and negative impacts of some of these projects, like installing hydropower projects, introducing electrical vehicles, encourage mud-ramped rural houses which produce locally, etc. All these techniques and all were explained, and the positive and negative impacts of this and the electric vehicles as well. Mr. Sanjeev Sobhee explained how Mauritius is trying to become more resilient to achieve the SDGs. He highlighted the institutional quality aspect for the achievement of SDGs, and he also mentioned the importance for the layers of government, private sector, and community engagement in order to achieve. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Maitri. With that, I would also like to thank all the speakers today once again, and also all the rapporteurs and all the team here. That's Maitri, Anasuya, Gargi, Joshita, Jensi, and especially Anupama for coordinating this whole event. With that, I would like all of us to switch on your videos if you can, or else if that is not permitted, I think we would just take some, yes, thank you. So we would take some group photographs. If one of you could take a group photograph, we could do that. So you could look at the screen and then 3, 2, 1. Yes, we have one more. So thank you very much. We'll take some more photographs. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. I know we're 22 minutes behind time. We plan to end it at 4 o'clock, but we look forward to working with everybody. We have our email open to everyone. Anupama, if you could just put our email address in the chat box for everybody to partner. If you have any question, comments, feedback, please leave it there. Sorry not been able to take on any questions further because the panelists have been with us, speakers have been with us since 11 in the morning. And so our rapporteurs have been working on all the notes, and we would love to share with the whole community, with all the registered participants, our call for action report. And with that, this is not the ending, but this is the beginning of the first webinar series of the South Asia Regional Program. And we plan to have 6 other webinars, including this one. That means 5 others lined up until April. And we plan to meet all of you again on this online platform of SRI, Sustainable Research Innovation, which is being hosted by Africa this year. But we will be having a hybrid and online session. And eventually we plan to meet you all again in December at IISc or where feasible. So with that, if there's any final comment that the panelists would like to make, if the speakers would like to comment, we could take a few of your, we could take the floor for any questions you have or any comments. If Sanjeev, I can see Sanjeev, Purna here. I think our other panelists have left. They've left me a message. Is there any comment from your side?
From my side, I just want again to apologize for not having been really a good student. But I think we made it finally. And probably, yes, if in future you need any intervention from my side and any information, so feel free. Whichever could be members from the audience, the panelists or students. We are open to discussion and the cooperation at the same time. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to interact and to know you.
This is a labor. Yes. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll end this wonderful first ever launch of the South Asia webinar series. And thank you all. Thank you, Usha ma'am. I've seen all my colleagues and friends also log in from Sikkim and everywhere and posting all your comments. We'll leave the floor for comments for all the participants, and please email us. And we will be back in March with the next webinar series, and all the registered participants will also be put in our newsletters and our email chain for our rapporteurs and our leads and our coordinators to get in touch with you. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this first webinar session. Thank you.
ಅನುಪಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದಾರೆ, ನನಗೇನು ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ ಬಿಡಿ, ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಮಾಡಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ.
Thank you, everybody. I'm seeing all your messages. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Atif, Mohammed, Dhananjay. many questions regarding certificates, so just email us at the email address that Anupama has shared. You could send a request if you would want participation certificates for students. After you provide a summary of the whole webinar series, that would, I think, help Anupama also take this forward. So yes, Atif, I hope that answers your question. You could do that. Send us an email. Yes, the webinar is over. There's a question from Chedilan. Yes, we've ended the webinar. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for sharing.